I think we're good here. Start this up. See if that works, hopefully. Let's see if we are live to go here. There we go. Alright. I'll jump in here. Happy little trees. Happy little trees today. Alright. I don't need to save myself here. Don't need to save my thumbnail. And I think that's good here, right? Alright, happy little trees today. Hopefully the audio is working. Let's test that real quick. Testing, testing. Yeah, there we go. That should be good. Hello, Blank. Welcome in, welcome in. Alright. Let's pull up. How do I want to do this? Let me think. I think. Okay. Well, first of all, I need to move this so I can actually see you guys and read chat. Alright. I think what our best way to go about doing this, and I'm sorry that I was late. The forest has been a little bit wacky. I had to wrangle some little critters, but we're all good now. We're all good. Let's see here. So what we're doing today is I have a client who wants to learn how to paint forests. And they have a reference sheet that they gave me, and they also gave me the version that they were trying to go for. So let's see here. I'm trying to figure out the best way to go about, like, arranging this, I suppose. I didn't get much time to think about it. But I think this will work. So this is their reference. And this is their study. So it's a pretty good study. It has all of the elements. You know, I can tell they spent a lot of time on the church in the background. They said that they were afraid of the fall color, so they mainly focused on green, which, you know, fair, because it's a pretty intense amount of different colors, right? So the interesting thing about this is I can tell that a lot of what this person is going with is how they think something looks, right? Is how they think it will look in their head. And I can tell that they are looking at the reference. And it must be hard to sort of look at the reference while changing the color live. But I think that the study would be more effective if you are able to, sort of study the color at the same time. You're not working as hard to change things, so you got a better sense of things. So I think what I'm gonna do here, I really should go to bed, but the malign thunder beckons me. Alright. I think what I'm going to do, this is what I normally do for studies, is it doesn't seem like it would be important, but if you're referencing something specific, then I would make sure to keep your canvas at the same size. And the reason that I say this is because then you are not scrunching things together and you are not expanding things. Everything is in the same ratio as your reference. So it's okay to change your reference a little bit. You just want to be able to, if you're doing a study, you don't want to stray too far from the study because you're adding too many things from imagination and you're giving yourself double the work, essentially. Also, hello, John, and hello, Vessa. Welcome in, welcome in. So I think the best way for us to go about this is I've duplicated this reference. I'm just going to bring it over here. I'm just going to move these over so we have a little bit of a gap. And then I'm also going to change my paper to being gray, because gray is a good neutral for us. We won't get distracted by anything too light or too dark, right? So I think that always makes sense, is to help make it gray. And just so that I make sure I'm not covering this, I'm going to move myself over, because that would defeat the whole purpose of this being a tutorial if I was in the way, now wouldn't it? About there is probably good, and then you can still see everything that is going on, and my ears don't get in the way, my wings don't get in the way. So, let's see here. make sure. Make myself a little bit. There we go. Maybe I'll scooch down here just a tiny bit, just so I'm not in the way fully. Let's see. Where am I? I'll just sort of scooch down here, ever so slightly. Have a little bit more room, a little bit more comfortable then. And yeah, I'm going a little bit about this Bob Ross style today, but I think it works. Happy little trees, right? I think it works. Alright. So, I'm not zooming in yet because I want to see everything from a glance. I'm digging the Night Chill playlist. It's just our calm instrumental, but it works. It works. Alright, so now what I'm gonna do, and this is gonna seem counterintuitive, right? But I'm actually going to, we have this selected here, and we are going to just fill it with a blank color, because we don't want it's not helpful if it's already done for us, right? So let's pick a base color, right? I'm going to pick the green of the foreground, because it's what's most apparent to us. And then I'm going to fill this in. It's a little bit off color, but bear with me. Bear with me. Am I recording this for the client, or is the client here? I should be recording this. What is wrong with me? Oh my gosh. I only have the YouTube end right now. Oh my gosh. Thank you, Vesta. I have to hit the recording button. I didn't promise them a recording. I just promised them the deliverable of the PNG. But if I can give them a recording, then that would probably be very useful. So, okay, we're recording now. So what I was just saying before. Also, hello, Ramon. If you, to my client, if you do get this recording later, I am live streaming. So if I am talking to chat a bit, don't mind them. They are all very friendly, and I do talk to my chat a lot more. So I'm not saying that they need to be quiet for this tutorial or anything. They can ask questions as well, which hopefully will help you if you end up having those same questions. So what I've done so far here is I've pulled up your reference, your study, and then I'll go over this again real quick. I duplicated the reference, and I think what's really helpful is if you have your study the same size as the reference, right? Because I understand that you were saying that you were previously painting everything in with the greens because you were a little bit fearful of the fall colors, which is understandable because they can be a lot. There's definitely a lot to work with, but I think we can still tackle it. So you're giving yourself a little bit extra work if you are trying to get the perspective, get the space, get the composition, and change the colors and change the size of the canvas at the same time. It's a little bit of, it's a lot. So I think what we're going to do, I'm just going to show you how I would go about a study. Then I'm going to go to your study and point out what I would adjust or pay attention to. And then I will go and break down a little bit about how you can paint trees in general if you want to just practice the rendering side of it, right? Because I'm going to show you in this study, I'm actually not going to put in a lot of detail, and you'll see why. So what I'm going to do first is I have your second piece here, and I've just basically alpha selected this so that I can't paint outside the line, right? I won't be able to go outside here. There we go. And then I'm just going to fill it in. And I have everything zoomed out right now because I find that it's easier to work when you are zoomed out at first, and then you can go into the detail later. And it's something that I struggle with too because I always want to go straight to detail. But trust me, when you're doing a landscape piece, this is the way that you want to do it. So I am going to go and use a, what do I think? Probably something like a charcoal, I feel like. I want something very, very textured to work with this. Let's see, I've got, is Can Kale gonna be good for this? Maybe. Let me actually test this real quick, see if this is a good color. This is good. Yeah, I'll work with this. It's not as textured as I'd like. I think I have something more textured. Lac has some good brushes. And it's not the brush that makes the art, but sometimes it does help just give a little bit of that, like, that sprinkling of effect, right? I won't work with something super, super textured, but maybe like a chalk? Nah. I'll go with, what was I just using before? What did I just have? I couldn't even remember. Yeah, Lax watercolor is probably good. So it's like any watercolor, any charcoal. And what I'm going to do is I'm gonna lock this so that I'm only painting inside the line. And the color that I picked is the color of the grass here. Actually, hang on. I always forget to do this, but this will actually help. Let me bring up my crystal so you can actually see what's happening. Wouldn't that be helpful? I think that would be helpful. Here we go. It should work. And up here. Up here. That's not useful at all. Alright. Try that again. I don't know why it does that. It's very strange. There's a little bit of weird glitching from time to time. Alright. We good here? There we go. There we go. Now we're rolling. Yes, I'm doing my best. Thank you, Vessa. No, you guys are not evil. You guys are sweet little bunnies. Sweet little stargazer bunnies. Alright, okay. We're good here. I am very professional. So what I'm first going to do is I'm breaking down the color of this background here. You can see why I was grabbing the crystal, so you can actually see what I was doing. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna start, and I'm comparing, okay? I'm comparing the shape of the different elements you have. So you have your foreground here, and then you have your background. So right now, I'm just going to block in the shape of the foreground, okay? That's all I'm gonna do. My guess is when you did this, you sort of went layer by layer, section by section, which is fine, but I feel like that this is sort of what you may have done, because this is how I used to work, right? Is you end up putting detail in every section and then moving on to the next section and then adding the detail and moving on to the next section, and you're going layer by layer, and what happens is you end up creating this sort of diorama effect, right? Where everything kind of looks like layers of paper that you have, that you've sort of stacked one in front of the other. And it kind of creates like one of those 3D paper craft effects, but you don't actually want that for this. We want it to flow very nicely. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to show you how I would, I think I'm just going to use like maybe 3 layers, and I'm guessing that you probably used more. I could do this in 1 layer, but I'm going to do it in 3, because I see 3 elements to this, right? I see our main foreground, and then I see our middle ground, which is mainly the trees, and then the background, which is the mountains, and then I guess if you wanted, you could have the 4th layer, which would be the sky, right? So I'm going to treat this as, we're going to go, let's see, probably best to go backwards, and then we can sort of refine as we go. I thought we were jackrabbits. You guys are bunnies. I mean, I guess some of you could be jackrabbits, but mainly bunnies. So I've got the foreground, which I actually did on 1 layer, and now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, let's break it up. Let's make it a little bit easier. So let's grab the sky. Lock it so it can't move would be helpful. I can see that this is very, very bright, right? And it doesn't really matter if I'm going out of the way, because we're gonna have these stacked layers, right? But I'm gonna show you how to integrate them. So we have sort of this rough sky look, sort of sunsetty. This is actually a very interesting color, because you wouldn't normally see the sunset kind of having like this edge of red. So that's actually very interesting looking to me. I have not seen this photo before the client sent it to me. So this is something I'm seeing for the first time, and this is very interesting. We're gonna add a little bit of red here, and there's some deeper red in the corner. So I'm gonna add bit of that deeper red. And it doesn't have to be perfect. We're just sort of making an estimation right now, okay? I kind of miss these Bob Ross style sessions, I'm not gonna lie. I feel like I'm able to very clearly talk about the kind of stuff that I'm doing in this way. And I'm just comparing again. So this piece of the cloud is about 2/3 over, and this is about halfway. So I'm gonna move this a little bit. I'm gonna make it a little bit smaller. And I'm just sort of painting over it. I don't really care if it's exact. It's a study, but I'm not going for a master study. If I was going for a master study, I would want to get every stroke as close as I could to really, really, like, hone in on all of the rendering. But because this isn't someone else's painting, because it's a photo, we're not going to be doing a master study. We're going to be doing a study. So we're doing a photo study. It's a bit more loose. It doesn't have to be exact. But I'm moving the cloud over and just so it matches a little bit more with my composition. And I could sort of tweak it, move it away how I need to, keep painting over it. But let's just say that that's our background for the sky element, right? I'll make another layer over that one. And then I'm just going to sort of tackle the mountain area. And I see that you painted this very, very green, and then you have the sky being very blue. The mountain is probably going to be made of like a rock material, right? So you wouldn't have a green necessarily, you're going to have like a slate, like a gray. And then, you're probably gonna have a little bit, you have some of the snow peak on the top, right? The snow cap. So it's going to be much more, this is very much towards like an aqua. This is going to be more of a slate leaning on purple. You can see a little bit of the trees in the background, but they don't really, because of the atmosphere of the sky. And the other reason that it's more purple is because it's picking up some of the lights from the sky here in the foreground, where it's more of a sunset, so you're gonna get warmer tones. I guess here you could have cooler tones because you have a daytime sky, but even with the daytime sky, you're not gonna have it this intense of a green. It's still going to be fairly muted. So I'm just going to, I could color pick, or I could try to just get it from the color wheel directly. I'm doing it color picking just for speed. But if I'm looking at this and if I blur my eyes, then I can tell that it is a very warm slate gray. Test it against. If that's too warm, then I can go back and I can say, okay, it's gonna have a little bit more coolness. I'm gonna bring this more, I still have it very, very muted, but it is more in the blue area. And that's a little closer. And then there are some patches where it's like very, very vibrant. So we'll add that as well. But it's going to be saturated, but it's not going to be like neon, right? Because I know you're saying that you were struggling a lot with the color. So that is something to keep in mind. It looks very bright, but it's never going to be here. Like, this is going to be, that's going to be very, very different, right? It's, if you look at the color wheel here, is in the corner, and then over here, you are closer towards the middle. This is desaturated. And it's actually more of a, it is a green-blue, but it does have a lot of tones of purple in it. So I'm gonna put it like here for the base and maybe gray, and then I'll add the detail. So again, I'm just gonna block in what I'm seeing. Probably go here to start. Make my brush a little bit smaller, because now we're getting into a more detailed aspect of it. And I'm just going to, I'm basically looking at the shape of the mountain and just trying to replicate the base shape here. Just, again, I'm not trying to be super, super perfect here. I'm just wanting to do a photo study. And this kind of has a bit of a curvature towards it. The mountain almost looks like a, I'm painting on the wrong layer. The mountain almost looks like a castle in a way, which is very interesting. You know, it kind of has these like points on the top in the mountain range, which is very cool. All right. sort of erase if I don't get it in the right location. And this kind of crops over. I do see that this is a little bit off, so I'm just going to liquefy it to the edge. I know you said that you use Procreate. I'm not entirely sure if that is something you can do in Procreate. I think it is. I think there's a liquefy tool, but it works a little bit differently. But that's just my own perfectionism. You don't have to be that precise about, like, where something is landing. So I'm just going to put the range here. And see, this is what I'm saying, right? Even though I made this the same size, it's still a little bit off. You can see that this negative space is smaller than this negative space. So that's what I'm saying. When you are doing a photo study, you might as well just start off making it the same size, because it's going to be hard to estimate the size anyway. So making your life easier by keeping the canvas the same size as your reference will help a lot when doing these studies. And if you combine references, then that's fine. You don't have to do that. But if you're just doing this for practice and you're just using one photo reference, then that can be very useful. So I'm just going to get the rest of the mountain range here. And I'm just making it large enough so that I can work with the next layer, right? And I can't really see what's going on behind here, so I'm just adding in the area that I see. Maybe make that a little bit smaller. About there, it looks like. Make this a little bit taller and stronger. See, this is what I'm saying. It has this castle effect. It looks like the walls of a castle, which is very cool. All right, so now this is just a solid piece. That's not helping us too much yet, right? I'm gonna lock this piece so then I can't color outside of it. And I'm going to start adding the deeper tones. I can see that there's deeper tone that sort of separates the edge here. So I'm going to quickly sketch in where that edge is. And then make this a little darker. And I'm just sort of roughly estimating it, right? Because when you're doing a photo study, you don't have to be super, super precise with the detail. Because it in itself is not going to be super precise. I'm building a little bit of that cooler tone. I'm keeping a little bit of the warmer tone in the purple, right? We based this in with purple, and then I said we were going to add in this more vibrant blue. So now you can see how they're sort of playing together, and we're getting closer to this color scheme. I'm gonna be adding the vibrant blue where I see it in the piece, and then fading it and having a lighter touch and mixing with purple where I see that the purple takes over. So sort of in the darker areas maybe. And I'm just, again, mainly estimating shape here. Starlight, your stream's title reference gives me supreme joy. Bob Ross was a special person in the public sphere. Thank you, Seraphy. Or, thank you, Dual Thrones. I appreciate it. Yeah, I feel like, you know, since we're doing something that's, like, very chill and very tutorial-based, it does have a bit of a Bob Ross tune to it, so I wanted to sort of channel my inner Bob Ross today. I feel it works because we are focused on trees. We're doing the mountain range at the moment, but this piece mainly is focused on trees. I thought it worked today. Alright. I see that there's a little bit more vibrancy. It gets a little lighter over here. I think that's from the light hitting it. I might make this a little bit lighter in the purple as well. We're gonna start adding in the break of these mountain ranges. And again, I'm just tapping, lightly tapping, again. Something you'd see on Bob Ross, I suppose. But I'm just lightly tapping with my brush. And in that light tapping, we are making sure that our strokes are not super, super strict, right? Because if I wasn't doing the light tapping, right, if I was just, you know, getting the idea down, then that's fine, you can. It's more of an oil painting technique, and we want to sort of blend the colors together. So as you can see, you can see sort of when I'm grabbing a new color from the color wheel, and you can see when I'm just picking. If you see the color wheel change, then I'm just picking from the canvas, but I'm trying not to. I'm trying to go with the colors that we've set. So we have this brighter blue that you can see here. We have this darker blue that I'm grabbing. And you can see sort of get a little stronger here in the valleys. And this is actually a very, very intense blue, right? You normally would not see a blue this intense. So this is definitely some sort of light trick, maybe due to the time of day. We would not normally see something this this vibrant. I'm gonna grab that light color again. I can see a little bit of it where the range is changing. And then there's a little bit that's getting picked up on the side. Probably where the side of the mountain is before it hits the valley. And then I believe, from what I can tell, our sun is coming from this direction, right? So the sun rays are kind of hitting here. And this looks to be about sunset. So I'm guessing the sun is actually probably very low. And what that's doing is it's making these brighter pieces on the edge of the mountain. So I can pick it up a little bit over here, on this side, and a little bit here in the range. I'm gonna make sure that's a little bit more purple, less blue. We want a little bit of variation and a little bit lighter. Because in a sense, right, the light of the sky is reflecting on the mountain. So we're sort of pulling in some of the sky color into the mountain very, very gradually. You can even grab some of the sky color itself and then just lightly paint it on the mountain so it blends into the color. A nighttime stream, yeah, Astra. I figured that night is good for chill work time. So right now I'm doing a tutorial and I am helping a client with a master study. Or, sorry, not a master study, but a photo study. And then I'm just going here, and I can see that the main mountain range, light is coming in from between the peaks. So again, I'm not being super, super specific on what the exact color is or where the exact shape is. I'm following the shapes, but I'm not doing this one-to-one. And I just want to get the general idea down, so a little bit of light and a little bit of where the snow is probably, right? We were talking about the snow caps earlier. Sometimes it's nice to just let the creative side flow at night. Sometimes coloring books at night to relax. Yeah, exactly. I'm hoping that you guys can hang out today and just relax while I chitter away. And if you have your own work, if you're doing coloring books or anything, then I hope you can relax and join me. We're kind of having we're having a little bit of a Bob Ross session today. I do like this though. I feel like I'm not really under any pressure, and I like being able to explain my process. So I'm just sort of refining the shapes, refining the color. And that's actually probably all you need. It doesn't seem like as photorealistic, but when you're doing a study, when you're just trying to get the general idea of something, you don't have to be super ingrained on the detail, right? So like I'm looking over here, right? And I see that your mountain range, your snow peak, your brush is very, very thin. So I can tell you're trying to put a lot of detail in there. And you really don't need that, especially in the back. And I know it's hard. As someone who's really addicted to detail and does have a hard time stepping back, it's something I actually had to train myself a lot, honestly. I really had to train myself to not be super, super detailed. It's a trick you end up learning over time. But it can be a challenge in the beginning. It's definitely been a challenge for me. Something I had to learn. So I'm just adding a little bit. This is why I said that I like using a textured brush, because even without detail, the texture sort of gives it a little bit more of an illusion of detail, you know? And I think that works well here, especially with something organic, like trees and rocks and things. And we are going to get to the trees, but I wanted to sort of explain how I would go about the mountain range, if that would help break. It all goes together. And add a little bit more blue here just to blend it in, and I'm gonna grab some of the base color just so that the blue is a little bit softer. Unfortunately, I don't have like Bob Ross's oil palettes, so I can't do the thing where you make perfect, beautiful trees just with the edge of your brush, right? That's something where the brush actually really does matter. I know in digital art we say that your brush doesn't matter, but Bob Ross's technique is really brush dependent, actually. That's how he was able to sell so many kits and things, or the network anyway. The network was able to sell so many kits because those brushes actually really did determine a lot. I mean, he himself is very, very talented, but he was using a lot of techniques using those palette knives and brushes. Beat the devil out of the brush to make them trees, exactly. I'm currently 3D modeling a certain iconic improvised hand grenade. Happy little accidents. Oh my gosh, blank. Honestly, Starlight, this feels like a channeling of Teaching Fox without actually doing an art tutorial. An artist explaining her process is educational. Yeah, thank you. I do like doing tutorials like this. I'm fine doing tutorials on stream, and I'm fine explaining my process. And I feel like that is the best way for me to teach tutorials, right? It's not completely structured, but it's still educational and you're still getting the information. So I'm hoping that it's like a good compromise that I can continue with, because I just feel like this is a better way for me to work rather than like trying to script out an entire tutorial. So right now what I'm doing is I'm just grabbing the darkest parts of the painting, and I am making my brush a little bit smaller, like you were doing with the tree caps, and I'm just adding a tiny bit, almost semi-randomly, wherever I just think it needs to be a tiny bit of darker tone to create a little bit more contrast. It's not so much random, I am being careful about where I'm putting it, but just like, just in the cracks and crevices, more or less. Just sort of make things feel a little bit more finished and full. Especially anywhere where the mountains are sort of changing and adjusting their shape, right? Like where there's peaks and valleys, where there's turns. Places like that. Alright. I think we've spent enough time on the mountain range at this point. So, let's see. How are we doing on the color? That's about right. If I needed to tweak it later, I could. One thing I am noticing is I did paint it much larger than it is in this piece. So overall, what I will probably do is I'm going to just take the whole thing and I'm just going to shrink it a little bit. And I know this is something you could not really do traditionally, but since you are using Procreate, that is something you would be able to do anyway. So I would probably be more careful and precise if I was doing something traditionally, because I would not be able to change and update it to the extent that I just did, just by grabbing it and moving it. And this is why people used to think that that digital art wasn't real art and the computer was doing it for you. It's like, no, I'm doing the work, but I am able to like grab my canvas and squash it. Alright. Now we're going to go to the next layer. And this next layer is going to be a little bit trickier, right? So, here's what I propose. Okay? Here's what I propose, because now we're starting to get into the layer with, oh no, the layer with the trees. So here's what I propose. I'm just gonna save this real quick, make sure we don't lose anything. we go. I'll always love the story of why Bob Ross was the way he was. In his previous career, he was a drill instructor in basic training, which is like the movie stereotypes. It involves a lot of yelling. Oh my gosh. So he wanted to basically do like 180-degree difference, right? After he left, he decided he really didn't like himself as the aggressive yelling guy, and decided to channel a quiet, positive, gentle vibe. I really like that, honestly. It's so funny, because like, you can't really imagine Bob Ross as a drill instructor, right? But that's really cool. Okay. Here's how I think we're going to go about doing this. And this is going to be a little bit confusing, so bear with me if you can. I think what we are going to do, and this is why sometimes I like to do this all in one layer, but I'm trying to break it down. Yeah, I do know that there were some dark elements. I can only imagine, honestly. Okay. Here is how I think we should do this. We have our sky as one layer. We have our mountain range as another layer. The next would be the trees, but because there's so much detail in the trees, my proposition is to do the big grassy plains here, these big shapes. Then we will go and do the foreground with the fence and the front trees. Then we are going to add a layer in between, and then we will do the trees inside here and the church and everything. And I think by doing it that way, we are going to be able to focus on our main shapes easier, and then the majority of the detail of the trees is going to sort of be our last steps. And I will show you how to tackle the colors, because I know that these are very intense colors. But I think by doing it this way, you're really focusing on the shape of the environment, which is really important because, and I'll break this down a little bit more later, because this is something that I'm really noticing about your piece compared to the photo, right? The reason that this is such a good photo is because the composition has literal peaks and valleys throughout the entire thing, right? And everything is very soft and flowing, and the piece guides you, right? So let me just show you. So our main area here, we have this big sweeping motion. Actually, hang on, let me make this easier to see. There we go. We have a big sweeping motion of these hills that sort of break our composition in half, right? So that's already something very calm, very rounded. Then we have the fence here, and it's making an S shape, which again, S shapes are always going to be more gentle. They sort of guide us. They have this natural flow like water that is very appealing to people. And then we again repeat that curvature, that valley. It has, like, it's not horizontal, so it's not stable and secure, but it has a very calming presence, right? So we've got the S curve of the fence, and then we've got these peaks and valleys, and then these are actually crossing over, right? So we're creating some visual differences. Yeah, they meander, exactly. We have some visual differences here. We have a little bit more of that S curve, kind of bringing the rest of the road together. We've got these bits of the trees, and they kind of flow in this way, a bit of another S curve, and then sort of continues up here. And then we have the mountains here, which are creating a little bit of a visual difference. So everything here was very, very soft, very rounded. And then we have the one element that's a little bit sharp, and then the man-made element that is also very sharp, right? So we have our sharp natural elements, we've got our flow of the trees and the road, and then we have our sharper man-made element. And the other thing that's very important to note is that in this photo in particular, the way that this is portrayed, we have this road, and it's going this direction. What's it doing? It is leading our eye to the man-made piece. That is very important. This is a form of compositional trick, right? So if I was to break this into, photo thirds, right? we have this man-made piece more or less right here. It's a little bit off, but it doesn't have to be perfect, right? And this is the rule of thirds in photography. So you want your main subject to be in one of these 4 places. It doesn't really matter which, but it's a general rule that you would want your main subject to sort of be in one of these middle corner areas. It's not directly in the middle, it's not directly on the side, it's not like hanging on the top or hanging on the bottom. It's kind of in this nice, comfortable middle area. So in this case, the man-made object is filling that middle area. And then over here, that mountain is, again, not straight in the middle, it's not straight on the side, it is kind of in that middle corner. It's just a very appealing way of composition. And then again here, with this field, if it had stopped here, it would be a little bit awkward, but it's not, it's continuing the whole area, and its middle area is right here, again, not straight in the center, not on the side, it's in this middle third. And this is very, very appealing to the eye. So you got our man-made piece here, our strong mountain piece here, and our main patch that doesn't have a lot going on, so the eye can rest. And it's right in the middle here. So with all that in mind, that is one of the reasons why the composition of the piece works very well. And just to point out what you have right now, so if I was to do that again, right? You have your thirds, and again, this is why it helps to have them all in the same compositional format. You do have the man-made object smack dab here. That is a good thing. That's a good thing. You did a good job by keeping this here. You do have the road in the same general composition, right? Right in the center. What I am seeing with the road, though, is that because you omitted the fence, you don't have that part leading the eye to the man-made structure. So that is definitely a very appealing part to this photo, is the man-made structure being led with the road. Instead, we sort of have a piece of the field here, a piece here that is very high, and then you have another piece going down here. And you do have this piece, which is good, because now you're creating that contrast with the peaks and the valleys. But what I'm mainly noticing here is these shapes are kind of repeating each other, right? You have this overall corner flow, and it's a very sharp corner, right? It's not like a calm valley. It has almost a squarish shape to it. So you just want to be careful of that. You just want to watch that. It's hard to see in here because there's a lot happening, but this might be more of a man-made hill. It's a little hard to tell. I think this one is sort of going downward and sloping. But anyway, I think you have a little bit of repetition of shape here. And then let me see. Your mountain range, I would have a little bit off to the side, just so you have some variation between where the man-made object is and then where the mountain is. A little bit closer to this corner, so that you have that nicer composition. And then the trees here in this photo are kind of covering your mountain range. So, I don't know. I feel like you could kind of work either way with that, but hopefully that makes sense. And then this road that you have, hang on, let me move this so I can actually see what's going on. You have a very straight path. I think that's the difference, is if I go back here, let me just paint on all of these. We have this kind of man-made hill structure, but it slopes very gradually. It's a very shallow slope, right? So we have this slope, and then it goes down gradually. This slope, it goes down gradually. It's very close to the horizon line. And then on yours here, you have what I think you're trying to do with going around the corner, but because of where the shading is, it doesn't quite read the same way. So you have this nice slope, and then it goes down a little bit too fast. You have this nice slope, a little bit too fast, a little bit too fast, a little bit too fast, and it kind of creates this, it kind of ends up looking like the ledges in like the Mario games, because it doesn't have that gentle flow downward where like a bike could glide down it, you know? So like you'd be able to have a bike here, and this would be a little bit dangerous. And then you also, when you're doing the road here, you'll see on this road, it has an S-curve. It's hard to see because everything else is on here. So let me just remove that so you can see what I'm saying. You have, again, there's a little bit of a straight path here, but it's mainly an S-curve. It's this slight, gentle curve. Here you have it very, very straight, and then it very quickly changes direction. It's a little harsh. So it's very straight, changes direction. Here, it's a very gradual S-curve. Another unexpected call anyway. I'll tune in later on a different stream, Starlight. Alright, no worries, Dual Thrones. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your night. So I think this sort of gentle flow is what you want to go with. And the shapes you have here are a little bit steep, a little bit harsh. So I would just watch that, because I think that will make your atmosphere, regardless of any type of forest or painting that you're working with, keeping those shapes in mind will help everything feel more calm and serene. And we'll remove these. Now, after I've established all of that, because that didn't take too long, let's go and add our next layer. So again, I'm just going to pay attention here to the shapes, the negative space. And like I said, I want to start off by creating these hills, and then we're going to go in between with the layers, okay? So I'm just looking over here. I know this color is not correct, but it helps me sort of base out everything into a color scheme I can see. And then I see that there's another piece behind here. I'm watching these shapes, this very gentle curve, this very gentle slope here. And then I know that there's one about here maybe, where the church is. And I do understand that you did say that you were not fully basing your piece on this photo, that you did take a lot of artistic liberty. The reason that I'm going about doing the photo one-to-one is because I feel like it's sort of easier to understand my thought process of the piece, that when you go and use another photo, you can sort of see what I was looking at and what I was pointing out, and then apply it to the next piece that you do. So I have these general shapes here that have these nice S-curve shapes. And I'm not gonna do the fence here, but I just want to pay attention to like where it's going to be eventually, right? So then with all that, I'm just going to go back with my main color and sort of erase where that was. I just want it very faint. I just want to get the idea of where it is. And then I can go back and I can find the right color. So there's more of a blue-green, right? This keeps a little bit of its harsh yellow on the edge because of where the sun is hitting. And then it goes back to that harsher blue-green. And it actually gets pretty deep here, so I'm going to try to blend these a little bit nicer. And it gets really deep. There's some sort of crevice here. I can't actually tell what that is. And then there's a little bit of a highlight, but it's very, very subtle. It's probably less yellow. Has a little bit more of a blue-green to it still. And I'm just going to make that a little bit lighter. You're never going to get like this neon blue-green in nature. It's always going to have a little bit more of a yellow lime color to it. It's never going to look like a highway sign, right? But this does have a lot of blue here, so I'm trying to find the right balance. Something like, oh, a little too far. Something like that. And if I make my brush bigger, then I can tap on it lighter. Over here, it's definitely a lot more yellow than on this side. Again, that's probably because of the direction the light is coming from this way, and this is going to be a little bit more in shadow. So I'm just going to grab some of these more blue-greens, and again, I'm just using my textured brush, and it kind of helps us get like patches of grass feeling, right? I don't have to do too much to that, and really any textured brush in Procreate will work for this. You just want something that's not a full, solid, round brush, right? We just want some way to make really quick texture, and then you won't have to do this dappled effect that might be taking too long, right? You just need a little bit of a textured brush. That's all you need. And if you can just tap it very gently, then you'll be able to estimate the feeling of it. And I know that there's brushes like these in Procreate. I know that you can download these as well. This was clearly a mode section, so you can see a little bit of the mow lines here. I might just sort of follow that path ever so slightly. Not gonna make it perfect, but just to show there's something there that I'm paying attention to. Maybe make it a little bit more of that blue-green, a little bit less of that yellow, kind of mix them in together as we go. Right? I'm just tapping. And I can see that, you know, the grass is a little bit dead over here. It's, you know, it's fall, so the grass is drying out. I'm gonna put a little bit more yellow here. There's a big patch that I see right here of yellow. It's a pretty intense yellow. A little bit lighter. Sometimes when you're mixing colors, they get really dull, so you have to, even if you're color picking, you sometimes have to go back to your color wheel and go a little bit higher, a little bit lighter. And then just bring that all back. And I'm just gonna grab more of that red. I'm gonna make a really big brush, just so I can cover a really big surface really softly, and that'll get us our dried grass effect. It's a little dark here. A little on the darker side. I'll make it a little duller so it kind of blends in. So I know that the fall colors can be scary because there's so many, but you don't have to be scared of them. Just sort of take your estimation of them and then softly blend them together. Just grab a big brush, get those bristles to do most of the work for you. And then just get a nice estimation of the dry grass and the changing seasons. I think something like that will be good. And right now this looks like an open field, right? But we'll fill it in. We'll fill it in. Over here, again, it's very dry. We'll fill that in a bit, and we'll make this very muted yellow, green. It actually has a lot of gray in it as well, so we'll do that over here. And then I can't quite tell what's going here, but I'm just going to estimate that it's probably going to be fairly similar to this. Then I'm just looking at where this valley edge is, adding a little bit more dry grass, maybe a little bit more of that rust color. And then this is all going to be trees, so we don't have to spend too much time refining this area. Just getting a little bit of the edge here, and I'll replace that with the granite in just a bit. Alright. Let's make this feel a little bit more full. Something like that. And again, I'm not using anything super, super fancy. I just have a brush with a little bit of texture on the edge, just so it's not fully solid. Alright. So the main thing is that we have a little bit of a color differentiation here, right? And that shows the top of the hill to the hill as it's going down. The side of the hill. Grab a little bit more of that dry color, make the brush bigger so that it blends easier. And something like that. Okay. And I'm gonna notice that there's also this middle patch of grass here real quick. It is fairly dry all around. There's not too much green in it. We'll add a little bit of green. And it's pretty dark on the edges, so... We're getting ahead of ourselves, though, actually. We're getting ahead of ourselves. So now we have our background. We have... Let's see here. Let's go with what we have so far. We've got our sky. And we've got our mountains. And then we've got our foreground. So in between the mountains and the foreground, I'm going to make another layer, right? So we have our mountains, and then we have our foreground, 2 layers up, and then in the middle, we now have a blank background. Hello, Sea Hero. No, we're just on the YouTube side for this. I think YouTube side is mainly going to be chill art. I could be on the Twitch side, but you guys are helping me with the watch hours. Alright, let me take a quick break here. So here is where things get a little bit scary. I know that you were worried about the color. We're gonna go through the color. What I'm going to do for this, we're going to estimate a lot, okay? And then I will sort of teach you how to do things in more detail. But when you're doing a photo study of a big field of trees, you actually don't have to do too much. You just have to get your color values right, okay? Here's how I'm gonna do the next one. I think it'll be best to start from dark to light. So I'm gonna grab this dark green of this fir tree, right? I'm gonna make my brush fairly small. I'm gonna pay attention to the shape going on here, okay? And then a little bit of the shape here and here. I'm not going to bother with this part right now. That's gonna be our main foreground. I'm just going to bother with this middle ground of trees right here. So I'm going to follow this shape. I'm gonna follow this shape. And then we're going to break these down in between. Here's how we're gonna do it. Go to our middle layer. That's in between our mountain and in between our foreground. And I'm just going to pay attention to these shapes. I can make this purely solid because this is nothing but tree. And then I'm going to see how far it goes out here into the valley. It goes pretty far. Again, I'm just basing the color right now, right? We've got this part here that we can't paint over, and then we've got this part here that we can. So we're going to keep refining this as we go, but I just want a general idea of where things are. If this is a little bit too much, if we went too far, we can just go in, erase it real quick, come back, add in more detail, add in more solid color. I'm looking over here, and this is where I'm going to start. I'm just going to be making these quick strokes and just sort of seeing where the trees are. This is very estimated because, again, I have a textured brush. It does make my work a lot easier. It's not the brush that makes the artist, but it's the artist that can use the differences of the brushes. So everything is just very soft, and I'm just taking advantage of the texture. And the texture is creating that illusion of the branches, right? So I'm just gonna try to match the shape to what I have over here as best I can. Doesn't have to be perfect. Just want the general idea. Okay. I'm gonna go over here. I'm looking at where these are. Maybe it goes a little further, and then I'm just gonna use the edge of my brush to give some texture to these trees. I can see that these fir trees pop up a little bit more in this end. I'm gonna add a little bit more texture here. And over here, you can see where these are popping up. So we're just getting the silhouette down, okay? Just the silhouette at the moment. I'm just getting the tips of the happy little trees. And then over here, this is gonna be our main section of trees, right? Gonna make this piece of the fir, and I'm paying attention to the direction of the leaves, and they're going upward, right? They're going upward because they are trying to reach a little bit of the sunlight. It's a fir tree, so they don't have to do that much, but just a little bit. If I go too far, I can just erase it, try again. This is a nice thing about not working totally digitally, right? Or, sorry, with working digitally, as opposed to oil painting. You know, Bob Ross is able to do this with a palette knife, and that scares me. Can't easily come back from your mistakes, but, you know, happy accidents and all that. So I'm just getting the general shape of this tree here. Was streaming today, and the mistake I realized is the bitrate was set to 600, not 6000. Yeah, I have trouble with that too. I struggle with figuring out the right settings as well. How is things looking actually? 'Cause sometimes, oh no, it's happy. That's cool, it's happy. I was changing frame rate and stuff earlier, so I'm glad it's happy. That's good. All right. Then we have this big tree that actually covers a huge amount of what we're doing. It's about there. Again, I'm just sort of estimating where these branches are based on what I can see. And I'm just sort of more or less estimating this silhouette, right? It actually looks more like a wire brush than a tree at the moment. It's actually a strange tree. I'm not really sure what type this is. It's making a little bit of a strange silhouette to me. I'll add a little bit of gaps because I see it's not fully solid. And there's probably some trees in front in between. Some details here or there that are hard to see, right? And then I see some that are not, they're not fir trees. They are more of a, I don't know tree types by name, in all honesty. But they're not firs. They're not maple. Not really sure what they are. But we're just sort of gonna estimate their shape again. So again, I'm just looking at the silhouette, and I'm using the texture of my brush here to just sort of estimate, and this is pretty solid. So we'll just do something like this for now. We can have a little bit of the brush coming in and giving us lighter rays of tree. Again, if this is too much, then you can always come back. You can always chop it When you start doing more of these studies, you won't be as afraid to just, like, chop right into these pieces. In the beginning, it's scary to do that, but as you do more of these, you'll realize it's not too bad. And you can always go back and refine and all that. Everything that you need to. So that's what our front layer is going to be, is fixing all those as well. Yeah, I don't want to bother with that tree right now. I'm just going to do these ones in the back. And then these ones in the foreground will be later. Oh, I love this song. It's so gentle. Alright. So now that we have this silhouette established, now we're going to lock the silhouette, and we're just going to start working in our color. So I'm going to start with what is familiar, and then we're going to go into the unfamiliar. I'm going to start with doing anything I see that should be a green or a yellow. Something more dark, we're going to go from dark to light, right? So we're going to go with a little bit of a dark green, a little dark muted green. I see that there should be a little bit of it here, a little bit of it in the back, a little bit over here. Anywhere where I see that there should be a dark green, I'll just sort of add it in. And if this is a little bit lighter than our silhouette, then I'll be adding it a little on this side where the sun is going to pick it up. And I do see that you did it here, but you want to keep in mind what direction your sunlight is. So if your sun is coming from here, for instance, from this direction and going down, then you want most of your light, you have it on the hills here, but then on the tree, I can tell that you were paying attention to the fact that there's sort of a uniform color here, but you can kind of fake it a little bit. You see over here, there's like, you can see that there is more of a highlight and a little bit more of a shadow. And you can kind of mix those as you go. So I'm going to be doing a little bit of an overpaint of your piece, just like where I would estimate shadows to go. And I'm doing this study, I'm doing this study, a little bit of a paint over on yours, and then a little bit of a call out. And hopefully that'll help explain things. So again, I'm just using the texture of the brush to add a little bit more color. A little bit more color where I would think that there's light. And again, I have this locked so that I can't paint outside of it, okay? That'll help you a lot. There is going to be mainly dark silhouette here, but I just want to pick up a little bit of the color. I'm going to do this over here too. If I see a little bit of green, maybe a little bit of a pretty solid yellow here, but alright, let's just stay dark for the moment. You can see that this is like very, very difficult, right? With the interspersed color, but I know we can do this. What you can probably do is go back and forth. So there is a lot of interspersion. There is a lot of color mixing. It does get a little bit confusing. But this is something that we can get done. I am going to pay attention to where these are, more or less. And I'm going to do what I was doing before with the slight touches of a little bit of a lighter green. I'm just going to intersperse them, even if they're not exactly where they should be, actually. Just sort of playing around with adding a little variation using color. All we're doing here is adding variation. And there's actually not too much of this lighter green, so that's actually probably enough. I'm going to grab a little bit of a lighter green just on the edge of this tree here for some variation. Anywhere here that I think could use it. This doesn't have to be perfect. This doesn't have to be an exact match. We just want to get some variations going. I'm using fairly dull colors. I'm using things that are not very high in the corner. These things are pretty desaturated. But that's another reason why I made the background gray, is to get that neutral tone so that it wouldn't distract you too much. Very helpful to have the neutral gray. So now that we have the green, we're going to go in and start adding more of that yellow. That yellow is going to be a little bit more powerful. It's going to be taking up more of the piece. is more orange. We're gonna start with our yellow. We're gonna go from green to yellow to orange to red. Gonna make this a little bit of a duller yellow, so it's not super out of our league here. And I can see a bit of the yellow here, a little bit interspersed. This is why I'm layering the color, is because it is mixed in a lot. So I'm just going to go anywhere here, make my brush a little bit bigger, anywhere where I see that there is like a brighter yellow. Make it a little bit warmer, just so it matches the tone of these other trees. I'm just putting a little bit of color anywhere there should be yellow. And that's the thing when you're painting trees, when you're painting things that are very organic, you don't have to be very precise. You can just get the impressionistic feeling of it. I'm just gonna add a little bit of yellow, making a bigger brush, just getting the feeling down. And then anywhere where there should be orange, I think I'll paint in a little bit of yellow just to use it as a base tone. Okay? So anywhere here where it's going to be mainly orange, I'll use a little bit of a base tone here, and I have to be careful because it is a little bit darker. So I'll make it more like maybe a gold. Maybe a gold will be good. Maybe a little bit more saturated, right? I'm gonna go backward a little bit more saturated, a little bit more towards that bright yellow gold, but I don't want to do it too fast. Just adding the color at the moment. And then over here, I just want to follow the main shape of the trees, right? So I might make my brush a little bit smaller. And just sort of do that wire brush shape again, right? A little bit of that wire brush shape all throughout here. And then I might have a little bit of a gap if any of these trees are meant to be a darker color. Over here, a little bit of the wire brush shape. And then what I'll do there is after getting the wire brush shape, then I'll go back in and I will add the trunks. And I can kind of go back and forth as I see fit. Anywhere where I think there could be a little bit more of a gold. Making my brush, I'm changing my brush size. I'm making it larger and smaller as I go. It's gonna be really, really small over here, right? These are like tiny little dots of paint. And this is what I like to call the ugly phase. The ugly phase is when it doesn't quite look how it should. It's not really where you want it, but it has to go through this stage. It's that ugly in between. It's that little middle that can be really discouraging. But you have to push through, because once you get past the ugly phase, it'll look a lot nicer, right? Okay. So now that we have a sort of a muted gold established, now I'm going to start going in with the more intense colors, right? I'm going to take this brighter gold, and I'm going to do the same thing. I might make that a little bit closer to what I had before. But I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna start adding in the color, adding in the brighter color. Especially on the right side, because that is where my light is coming from. And you see that I'm not coloring it over fully? I'm leaving a bit of that gold, and that gold is becoming our shadow. Might have a little bit of it here on the edge, but I've got a lot of that shadow that I want to keep establishing. And because we have our brighter color, we can be more intense in the back with those little dots. Brighter color on one side, where we are establishing these trees. And again, I'm not 100% fully following the exact tree and the exact color. Just want to get a nice estimation of things. And then we are working towards brighter and brighter colors. And this is how you can use those bright colors fearlessly. I know those are weird colors, you know? Fall sometimes gives trees very crazy colors from time to time. And you can see we're sort of getting this idea of this larger forest area developing. And over here, this is going to be a little bit trickier because we can see it in more detail. So, you know, people can judge us a little bit easier. But I'm just getting the color down where I see it. And you'll see once we add the branches, it'll all come together. I'm adding these very, very intense golds now. And then it's gonna get more intense. It keeps going. It does kind of look like a cacophony of color mess, but this is what I said. This is the ugly phase. Now we're gonna go even deeper. Now we're gonna start going towards that crazy orange. And I can see it up the top here. It's actually very hard for me to discern what is happening here. So I'm actually just going by color instead of shape at this point. And by just being very light with my brush and making these little strokes, I'm able to get the feeling of foliage. Without exactly getting the foliage, right? And then we're gonna add darker color in between, and that's going to help solidify things again. Again, I know it kind of looks like a mess. just bear with me here. I want to add a little bit more color of oranges. We're adding more variation again. And there's actually some almost like purple magentas here, which is crazy. I don't want to add too much of this color. I'm not really vibing with it. I don't want to add too much of that, actually. I want to go back to that yellow. I want to start adding some really bright marigolds. Really bright marigold color here. And I'm sort of going in a little bit of a circle shape because I want these to start feeling like branches. And again, I'm being pretty loose with it. I'm just making little strokes with my brush. And I'm just doing the branches like you have here. I'm just doing a little bit of the branch work where I would see the light hitting things. A little bit over here. And then we're gonna go back here. We're gonna add a little bit more of those light tones to the tops of the trees where the sun is, where you're gonna get the most sun, right? And you can see when I'm doing it, I'm doing a little bit of a pointed effect. And that pointed effect is kind of giving us our treetops. And I'm not doing them for all of them, I'm just picking a few. I'm just picking a few that could use those really intense yellows that we see here. And this study is taking a little bit longer than I would have liked, but I'm hoping that sort of explaining this is helping as well. And you can always go through and skip around and watch this at your leisure, especially like whatever parts are stumping you, or if you want to hear me talk about another technique again. Do you see how we're slowly building this gradual, like, field of trees? And they don't quite look exactly like trees, but from far away, you get the feeling that they're trees. And we're just going with our main brush strokes here. And I'm just picking a few places to really hit that intense light. I'm making sure that they are all on the same side. And they're not perfect, it's not an exact match to the photo, but that's okay. Because it does still feel like what we're after, right? It does still feel like that countryside with the field of forest. And notice how when I was making these strokes, I was able to stop myself from fully coloring these. I had these gaps. These gaps are the other trees of the other colors that you were thrown off by before. So the more dark, natural colored trees are sort of interspersed with these really bright gold autumn trees. Let's see, these are a little bit darker in the back, so I might go and grab my darker brush and paint them back in. And it's okay if we're using, like, I'm not basing the color on the layer, right? I'm just sort of going in, back and forth, grabbing different colors, then making a little bit of a mess, but in a good way. Alright. Still not too happy with how I'm doing it here. So I'm just going to quickly grab this purple that I'm seeing, and we're just going to add a little bit of that purple in the tree, because I noticed there's some trees in here that are purple, which is funny to me. I want to add a little bit of that variation of color. I think it's nice. You see how I'm not bothering with the man-made structure yet? I don't really have a need to. I'm putting all my focus in the trees. I'm not really sure where this purple is going, but, you know, just throwing it wherever it fits. And then what I can do here, maybe a little bit of purple here, why not? Make some variation. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and grab my darker green. My really dark green, right? And then I'm going to start going back and adding the tips that may have disappeared last time when we were adding all of our golds and reds. Just sort of adding those tips again and making them look like those are trees too. Those are also here. And in the back there's definitely a lot, so let me just unlock this, be able to draw a little bit outside of our range and make those dark, dark trees in the very, very back of the forest. And if I go too deep with it, I just grab some of those golds and add more of those points. Anytime that I feel like I've accidentally painted over a point, I can just go in and grab a color and put it back in again. Make sure that I still have that texture of the brush. And I can see over here that there's two very intense dark trees, so I'm just gonna go in and add that shape again. Make sure I don't lose it in the front. And give it its little friend over here. And then what I can do, now that I have this darker color, is I can make my line much, much smaller. And then I can kind of add in where a branch or two might go, right? So I have my trunk. Add a little bit here. I'm sort of fading it. I'm not really connecting them. And the reason I'm not connecting them is because then it looks like the thickness of the leaves is in between them. I'll just do that with some of the foreground ones. Right? I don't even need to really make the branches. I can kind of just give the general illusion of where the trunk is. And then if it seems too staticky, then I just go back in with a brush and sort of cover it up a little bit. And it has a little bit of that feeling of tree foliage. Tree trunks and everything. And we kind of have this feeling now of this large valley of trees. I'm gonna go back in with my darker color over here because I see that there's a lot more dark tree. I'm going to sort of go back in with that trunk technique that I just showed you. Make sure you don't double up the line by accident. We're gonna add some more tree. Make a little bit of a texture here. Bring anything back that you accidentally painted over. It's fine if you did. You can always paint over it again. The smaller your brush, the more detail in the foreground. And I just see that there's like little trees here, and I'm just estimating where they should go. Any time where I feel like I I maybe muddied it, maybe added a little bit too much definition. I'll just take a darker color and I'll start making some in-between areas. And it just sort of fills in where the gaps of a tree branch would go. If you feel like you went too far, this is something you can always do, is go back and forth with the dark and the light, sort of giving a little bit more visual information, right? And then we're gonna add more of these trunks here. And again, if I feel like I did too much, then I can just always go back with the brush and give it a little bit more of that feel of a tree trunk. Hide the branches a little bit more. And kind of give this sense of filling everything in. And if I want to, you know, if I want to cheat a little and utilize digital to our advantage, right? I'm just sort of going over everything very rough and very loosely. And then if I want to push it a little bit, if I want a little bit more intensity. See, I think we got our nice feeling here. I'm gonna do one more tiny bit of bright gold on the edges here. Just a little bit more color variation, a little bit more information. And I think what I could do now is I might just grab an airbrush and sort of soften the edges. Anywhere where I feel like it needs to be a little bit darker, less intense. Vice versa, I can take the lighter color, sort of blend things in a little bit nicer. I feel like I need a little bit more definition between these two trees. I don't quite have that yet. I think it might be a little too saturated, so I'm gonna go more for like a slate in between there. Because it's a pretty dark area in general, I think. Yeah, something like that. I feel like I need to add a little bit more information here. It's very I mean you can see here it's hard to separate these trees a little bit when they're overlapping like this. But as long as you have like some semblance of the trunk, then you can just get the idea of it as being trees. And then of course, you know, working on this piece in the back that has much more of a visual tree structure will help too. There we go. I think that's good. We've got the feeling of the trees here, and we've really been able to capture it here. And then if we want to, what we can do is we can just do a very quick brightness and contrast adjustment just on this piece, just because I think it'll help us a lot. Make that a little bit brighter. Did I accidentally get the background? I did accidentally get the background. How'd I end up doing that? Did I accidentally start painting on the wrong background? I did, okay. Let's just grab this all real quick. Make sure it's in the right area. Yeah, there we go. Try that again. Don't accidentally paint on the wrong layer. There we go. Alright. So all I did is a 10% contrast. Just a little bit of a punch. That's all we need. Hello, hello, Talon. Welcome in, welcome in. I streamed this late. I'm thinking of doing like calm work streams at this time. I think it's nice. So look at that. In about like an hour, we got this general feeling of this landscape and this entire forest of trees. And now it's actually pretty easy to do the rest. This was the hardest part. This part is not going to be too difficult. So now that we have all these pieces, right? We've got our foreground, we've got our midground, our mountains, and then our full background. We're gonna do one more piece on top. And we're just gonna fill everything else in. And now that we know how to do the trees from here, now we can do these a lot easier. Now we understand the process, right? So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm going to get the road in. Once we get the road in, we can get the trees in. I'm just gonna... the general feeling of the shape of the road here. Got a lot of YouTube shorts done today. Nice, nice. I need to be doing more YouTube shorts. I'm just picking out, again, we're going back to shape language. I'm picking out the shape of how the road looks. And this is more of a highway. Again, I'm gonna watch this shape, this sort of nice, soft curvature. I know, it's kind of scary to paint over everything, isn't it? Trothy, thank you so much for subscribing! Hello, hello, welcome in, welcome in. Nice to meet you. You can see that it's like, we're following this path even though we don't really have much information to work with, right? This is where our observation of shape language comes in. And I can see that it ends right there at the corner. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna end it right there at the corner. I'm stopping a little bit early because it has a guardrail. And then this is all gonna be taken up by tree. But we're just gonna paint over it. Because once we're at this stage, we know how to paint over things, right? We can confidently paint over things. I know it can be a little scary, but we got this. I'm gonna see if there's any more shading to do. I think we mainly just have the guardrail here. So I'm gonna use a darker color and sort of quickly establish it. Because this is man-made, you generally want to be more careful about the detail. But because this is just a photo study, I'm not super, super concerned with it, right? I know it's going to be a little bit darker because we need that big pipe of metal. We just need to sort of establish where it is at the moment. And then do those pieces that are going to be, again, man-made, so fairly evenly spaced out. Yeah, but I'm not being too precise because we're not really seeing too much of that. Because it's getting closer to us, it's going to be a little bit wider as we go. We can kind of see it again ending over here. I want to make sure that I'm not getting the color off. So let me just redo that a little bit. Again, doesn't have to be super perfect. That's probably good enough. Get the general feeling. A lot of it's going to be covered by trees anyway, so. I got that shape a little off, so I'm just going to use a liquefy tool to sort of shift it around. I made it a little too much of an S-curve. There we go. That's pretty good. You could tweak it if you wanted, but again, it's not really the main subject of the piece. And thank you, Vessa, I appreciate that. And then we're just going to take that base color again, and what we're going to do here is we're going to add it right to the top. And by doing that, we're establishing the light source of the guardrail. Just want to add it right. It's sometimes hard because it's really skinny and I'm also not zooming in. Right there at the top. And then if you wanted, you could add, trying to get it here, there we go. A little bit to the edge where the sun might be hitting it, but that's not super necessary, but you could add a little bit here if you wanted. All right. Now, I'm gonna go back to my main brush, and I'm okay if I just paint over this, honestly. I might do another layer on top just because this is man-made, so it's a little bit more finicky when I'm doing trees over it, but we'll see. I just sort of need to add a little bit more of that dead grass over here. A little bit more of that, those darker tones. That's sort of establishing the 3D-ness of the grass, right? That darker tone where it gets a little bit thicker. And then, because I see a little bit of the tufts here, I'll just grab that darker color and start adding some very rough tufts. Doesn't have to be perfect. Something very loose like that. I actually don't want it to be super different from what we already have, so I'm gonna fade those out a bit so that they're not too obtuse, I suppose. And then we'll do a little bit of that over here. I'm just making the edges a little stronger, I suppose is the best way to say it. Because this road is man-made, so the grass is not really naturally flowing. It's kind of being stopped fairly abruptly. Something like that is fine. And then let's see how I want to do this. Because now we've got a lot going on with the trees, right? I think, yeah, I'll probably make another layer up top here, but let's just do our middle ground of trees and our church area. So I'm just going to grab this base color here. And this is going to be our shadow, but again, like I've shown before, going from shadow to light, easier than going from light to shadow. It's more natural, right? You shine a light on something to illuminate it, to see its base. So we're just going with the shape. I don't actually know if this is a church. I keep saying it's a church, but I'm not actually sure. I just assume that a building in the middle of a forest is likely going to be a church. Because, I don't know, this kind of looks like it's a steeple. It could be a different type of building in a different part of the world. I honestly don't know. But regardless, I'm mainly just getting the shape of it down. Mainly just working on the silhouette. And then I'm gonna go a little bit further than I need to because I will just cover the grass where I need to later. Alright, so that's fine for the silhouette, I think. Maybe this goes a tiny bit further. Yeah, the nice thing about doing this is that afterwards I can just upload this straight to YouTube, right? And I've gotten the client's permission to do that, so. Grab this gray color. I have a whole series of things that it's all just in real time. Because it's funny, right? My most popular videos on my channel are not evergreen videos. They are my real-time live streams that I didn't intend to ever be videos. I'm just getting the lighter color here. And starting to paint the top of this roof. I didn't think people really cared for the long time videos, but those are actually like my two most viewed things. One is on making an overlay and the other is on doing an anime master study, so who knows? And then if I stipple with my brush, stippling again, just like very light tapping, then I can kind of create a very subtle illusion of the tile used on this roof. And again, I'm just gonna go over it with a little bit of a darker color so that we are establishing that that part is in the back. And just go back and forth a little bit. Get that color down. And add a little bit of that lighter color here. Again, paying attention to where the sun is hitting on the right-hand side. That actually might be the blue section. It's hard for me to tell there. This does look like some sort of blue. Don't know what it's made out of. Some sort of blue stone. Now we'll grab the white stone area here. And as you can see, I'm just painting and then leaving a gap where that window is. Definitely church. Style reminds me vaguely Orthodox, Middle Eastern Europe. Oh, okay. Interesting, interesting. It's actually a little bit shorter. I'm just going to adjust it real quick. And then there's another one in front of it that appears here. Again, I can go over the tree because I can just very quickly put its branches back in. That's no issue. That's no worry. We're not worried about that. You definitely see countless churches like these around the Alps. I wonder if this is the Alps. I don't really know. There is a large mountain range here, so it's something. Alright. And just like that, pretty swiftly, we have our church painted in. Look at that. And then we just go back in with our brush. I'm painting right over the church. This is the same layer Kimek, thank you so much for subscribing. Thank you, thank you. I appreciate it so much. Thank you. Let's see here. Hope you are doing well today. And yeah, it's all on the same layer. I'm just painting right... This is all on the same layer. I'm just adding the tree brush area back in here. It's a little bit lower, so I'll just sort of paint this section right down here. Let that tree come down. And make this sort of match up again with the grass. Like I was saying before, right? I could always paint over the grass and paint over the church and see which takes precedence over which. Make that overall a little bit darker to sort of blend the edges. See, like I said, like the man-made structure actually was not super hard. Because now we understand the idea, especially with background pieces. Maybe not with like the foreground if it has to be really, really detailed. But we understand the concept of silhouette and then painting in the silhouette color. And that's gonna take you far. That's applicable in so many different situations. So now we've got our nice little church here. And then, I'm just looking. Now I think we're going to... Are we far away from everything? Yeah, okay. I'm gonna make another layer just for my case because of the rail, but we actually would not normally need to do that. I'm just gonna do it for my peace of mind here. So again, I'm just looking at the silhouette of everything. I'm looking at the silhouette of this branch. Or not this branch, this shrub. And I'm painting everything in a very dark color. And that's why I wanted it to separate, so I'd be able to paint out the guardrail later, easier. And it is right on top because I can just go over and erase pretty simply. Would I hide Easter eggs in my landscapes? If I was doing personal art, then I probably would. In this case, there's actually a video for a client, so I'm going over a photo study, and then I'm going to sort of point out in their study what I would adjust so that things are a little bit easier for them. But if this was a personal piece, yeah, I'd probably throw in a lot of Easter eggs. Physical and symbolic. I actually, I don't know if they're still in chat, but I do some commissions sometimes for somebody that are very storytelling based, and I always put in Easter eggs. A lot of time of other VTubers, but it's fun. Alright, general shape of the tree, general shape of the bush. Make sure I'm still using the right brush, to keep things consistent. And then over here, we can be pretty loose and rough with things. Who can that be, I wonder? Alright. Do you see how these are really, really sparse trees? We can make a pretty large brush and just use the power of our texture. Actually, you know, canvas size, come on. There we go. Actually, those ones in front, I would actually be better off doing separately. Because they're already very dark, and these are going to be very light behind them. So I'm actually going to do the light ones first. Because I know it's all dark, but if I separate the two, then it'll be easier when I have to repaint them with color. Trust me, it'll be easier that way. But, you know, same philosophy, right? This is a dark silhouette color, but it's going to be painted this lighter color. So I'm just silhouette throwing in all the trees just to the edge of this plane so that they are all more or less in the shape they need to be. And again, taking advantage of the texture brush helps us a lot. If you have a hard round brush, it's a little bit difficult. The texture brush makes it slightly easier. It's not that the brush is what makes you the good artist, it's just that you are utilizing the tools that you have. You could do this with a hard brush. It would just take a little bit longer. But I'm using this to my advantage in the same way that Bob Ross uses the palette knife. Same sort of thing, right? Palette knife doesn't make a good artist, but using the techniques of a palette knife can definitely help. So now we have this cacophony of just black nothing. But we're gonna work with it. And this can sort of be covered up because this is all gonna be covered later. And that's fine. I'm going to lock this. We're pretty close to being done. We're pretty close here. We're gonna lock this, and we're gonna grab those colors again, right? Those really bright oranges. I'm gonna start pretty bright this time. Or, okay, I'll go back to my gold, just in case. Let's just paint this all gold, because this is all gonna be on the lighter spectrum, right? And then we're gonna grab those really deep, intense colors. We're just gonna paint that right side again. We're painting a little bit on the left because it is still hitting the tops of these branches. But as you can see, we are kind of repeating the same methods. I'm grabbing a little bit of that red, painting over here, and just being fairly loose with the color still. There's more purple as we get further down here, so we can add more purple. More of that red. More of that yellow. I'm being fairly loose because I know a lot of it's going to be pretty covered up by this darker silhouetted tree anyway. So it doesn't really look like much, but that's okay. Whenever an art piece of mine includes a bunch of runes or arcane glyphs, I always sneak in a half-life lambda symbol somewhere. Nice. Bob Ross works with layers. He starts with a dark base and has the highlight layer on top. This might be an exaggeration, but he was ahead of his time working with layers. I wouldn't say ahead of his time necessarily. I think a lot of people work with layers traditionally in different ways. But it is cool that he was able to show a way of building things up, right? When traditionally you don't have the same layers in the sense that you do with digital, then it can be really nice to sort of build things slowly as you go. I do think that these are very well-known techniques, right? Like, if you look at different pieces throughout art history, there's a lot of buildup of layering of paint, right? When they restore ancient Renaissance paintings, they find that the artist was layering the paint. So when they're doing the restoration, it's hard for them sometimes to figure out what the final layer of the painting was supposed to be. Fun facts, fun facts. Alright, we're gonna grab a little bit of that purple and we're gonna make a little bit of a lighter version of it. That is way too blue. We need like a purpley red. Yeah, that works. Maybe a little bit brighter. I know traditionally animators use layers with the helps of cell. Yeah. Yeah, like lightbox work. So do you see how, as the trees are getting closer to us, I'm paying a little bit more attention to breaking up the direction of the leaves and everything? Or I should say, like, I'm making it look more like there are branches instead of just very, very roughly going in. As things are getting closer to us, I'm spending a little bit more time on their detail. And I'm just kind of hitting, you know, where the tops would go. Let me redo that a little bit, actually. I need to intersperse the branches a bit better. So kind of stagger them like a ladder, so that they're not directly together, but something like that. And then I'm going to use those brighter tones on one end. The main thing is you don't want things to look even. If they look even, they no longer look organic, and then they no longer look like nature. So you want to stagger things as you go. Staggering helps a lot in making things look organic. Because things in nature aren't man... You know, that's what separates things from looking very, very man-made. Is how much they're staggered there. Need to go back over there. That window should be a lot skinnier, I think. Here we go. And a little bit more of those bright colors. Just to the edge here. Just because they're bleeding into the edge a little. And then a little bit down here, and it's gonna be mainly covered up, but I want a little bit of it to peek through. There we go. Alright, and then over here, again, we have a little bit of those colors peeking through the edge. And there's a little bit of red here, and it is mixing in with the darker tone, so... I have to be super, super precise about it. Bring in a little bit of those tree branches again. And then because these are supposed to be behind the guardrail, I'm just going to very quickly erase here. So those trees are behind the guardrail. I shouldn't be able to see them very easily. And then, what we're gonna do is we're gonna pick another layer up top, and then we're gonna paint over there, and sort of fill in anything we might have missed. So if this should be a little bit more showing the background, and then painting that back in. We can do that. Pretty roughly, pretty loosely. And then here, make a little bit of a visual difference. Didn't mean for that to be solid color. I'm adding a little bit of variation while I can, really quick. And then over here, you can see here, this is pretty loose. This is pretty much just really rough brush strokes. I'm gonna flip these so that they don't go out of bounds. I'm just gonna go right over. And you see now why I was saying that even if we're using the darker color, it'll help to separate the layers. Because I want these to visually look like they're in the foreground and background. And then I'm just going up with these strokes. And there's all these trees that are going to be in the way, and then I'll add some variation of green so that they don't look so uniform. Because we don't want things to look uniform, right? That's what we're trying to avoid. But I want these trees to sort of stand out, so their silhouettes are more defined. You can see I'm very intentionally keeping those silhouettes more defined and easy to read because they're very close to us. And maybe one over here. Yeah, it reminds me of fantasy genre. I'm glad to hear that. I'm just working off of this photo, but I do like to hear that I have a fantasy genre element to my work. That makes me happy. And we're just sort of, again, using that brush to estimate some darker shadows and things. And then I can see that there's definitely some brighter color. So I'm just gonna go in with our brighter highlight area and just hit a little bit of the edge. And I want to make sure that I'm not messing up my silhouette too much, so I'm going to do it in fairly roughly, and then I'm going to fade it out to not being so apparent. And then I'm also going to make sure that this is thick enough so I'm not seeing too much of the guardrail again. Because anything man-made is going to be very distracting naturally. So now I'm just grabbing my darker color again. And I'm fading it so it's not super harsh, but we still get a bit of that color variation. I'm grabbing a little bit of that yellow because we have some sort of sandy, dry grass over there. And then grab the darker color and hide it a little bit. It all eventually just like flows together, basically. And I'll grab a tiny bit of yellow, add a little bit of a variation here. Not too much. I don't want this to be too strong. I actually probably don't want it too yellow. Probably want it more sandy. Pretty dull, honestly. Yeah, that's good. These might not be the exact trees, but we're getting the idea down, right? Alright. And then our last step here is just the fence. And the reason why it looks so less finished is because the fence is actually a huge element. It's taken up a big piece of it. I'll grab like its very deep purple. Right? Sort of the darkest part of it. And I'm not going to be super precise. This is a pretty complex looking fence. I'm just going to get the general idea down. If I was spending more time on this, I would put more effort into the fence, but all I really want is the idea of it going backward in space and giving us that strong, man-made but with natural material structure, because it's giving us that leading eye to where the church is. So then it kind of fades in a little bit. I think it stops like right here, actually. And then it looks like there's a little bit of a patch of... Maybe curve that a little bit more. It kind of stops here, right? It doesn't really look like it's continuing much. But because of the distance and the optical illusion, it's all kind of going in on itself. Let me use Liquify to get that shape down a little easier. Match that a little bit better. There we go. It should be a little bit shorter, a little bit more cropped. And then I can see that there is the wood pieces that kind of tie it together. Yeah, it's a very rudimentary looking fence. That does kind of add the charm to this piece as well. I'm not a fence builder, so I'm not being super perfect with this. For shortening in the distance is almost always 5 times as strong as you think it is, I've found. Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty dramatic. It's pretty intense for shortening, that's for sure. Something like that. It's not going to be exact, but yeah, it is pretty dramatic. All right. And then we'll just lock that. Grab our lighter color. A little hard to color pick here. I'm just gonna go over the tops. And then in between, I'll just sort of I'll blend them together a little nicer. I just want to get some of the lighter tone, especially on the edge where the sun's gonna hit it. where that sunset is. And as you can see, I'm really not following it super precisely. I'm just getting the general idea down. This is really rough for me, honestly. I'm normally a lot more paranoid about the exactness of things. But that's sort of the nice thing sometimes about doing these photo studies, is you can be pretty loose with it. You can be pretty, like, you don't have to be super crazed about every single detail. And then you can kind of just have fun exploring it and playing around and learning about the color theory of it and everything. Alright, I'm gonna grab a slightly in between color. Just sort of blend that together a little nicer. I might use an airbrush, and it just kind of very slightly helps me blend the colors. And then all I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna make a layer underneath that fence. And with an airbrush, I'm just going to sort of add where that shadow of it is, right? And then the airbrush doesn't actually look that good, so we're gonna fix that momentarily. I'm just sort of softening general plane, and then we're gonna go back with our main brush. I'm gonna grab the base and just sort of, again, light color so that we have our texture. And you wouldn't think that that makes a difference, but it actually does. It very much helps ground it. You see that? It very much helps ground it in space. So it actually feels like it's solidly there. So, more or less, the only other thing that I might do, I'll just use that same layer, is I might just grab this again and, oh, wrong one. Just sort of darken this color, make it more dappled, more speckled. Yeah, more or less. Right there. Again, I'm just utilizing the texture of the brush, not doing anything else. Adding a little bit more detail. There we go. So with that, that is pretty much how I would be approaching a painting study for this photo. Hopefully I was able to talk through a lot of it. So the next thing that I'm gonna do, sort of wrap things up here, is I am going to make some notes on your piece. Not obsessing over every minute detail? Preposterous. It can be a little bit tricky, yeah. It's something you have to get used to, but it does help. So hopefully by going through that step by step, it makes you not fear the really intense fall colors as much. Because I know that they can be very scary. Let me go over some notes here, really quick. Because I know this is probably the longest video you would be watching on how to paint a forest background. And you can speed up and you can skip around as you need to. So I already mentioned the part about the planes, right? So the other thing that I would say is looking at the way that you've done the tree, I would keep in mind how the branches are flowing, right? So right now what you have here is kind of this, you kind of have this, like, silhouette that is almost marshmallowy in a way. And then you have your shading on the bottom, which is fine. We're fine with shading on the bottom, and you are staggering it, which is nice. You are staggering the shading. You are sort of doing this, like, diagonal right-left situation, which is good. And then you have your highlight on the top. That's more or less how it looks, right? So what I would do is you're doing there's a fir tree. I'd sort of first establish your trunk, which you might have done here, right? And then I would look at a photo of the fir trees. Do you see how some of these were going straight up in this V shape, and then some were going outward in this V shape, and then some are going down? I would kind of do that. I would grab your base, and you're doing it a little bit here, but I would go a little stronger with it. I would really, like, let's say we're doing a fir tree, so sometimes they go upwards, sometimes they go down. It kind of depends on the type of tree. Let me quickly see if I have a reference for the fir tree that would help you. Not a fire tree, a fir tree. Okay. This is good. Here's our basic fir tree. You see how these branches go up a little bit? They have this sort of V shape. That's what we want to capture. So you want to create this like back and forth shape, and then using that texture of the brush, right? We're just gonna do our little V, right? Back forth, and we should stagger this. We should stagger our tree back forth, back forth. That's sort of our general motion, and then we want to fill it in. So we might make something that's like a little bit thicker. And this isn't super realistic, but again, ugly phase. This is the ugly phase. And then we're gonna go the other way. We're gonna have a few this way, and they look like they're coming at us. And then we're gonna make our brush smaller. And then we're going to sort of add those pine needles, right? That pine needle effect. And we're gonna go over them. We're gonna go over each of them a little bit. There's gonna be a little bit of an overlap, but that's okay. It actually helps that there's an overlap, because that's realistic, right? These are going to touch each other. These are gonna overlap each other. But do you see how I'm creating these pine needle effects, and then I'm adding a little bit of space? Just a little bit. I can fill it in a little bit more here, actually. Just a little bit of space. So we're just adding some rough pine needle shapes, right? Very rough. You might want to point these if you lost the point of the branch throughout doing this. Just something like this. A little bit of pine needle shape. Because again, what is the most critical part of doing all of this? Silhouette. Silhouette is your #1 friend when you're doing these. I'm just gonna add a little bit more on the top. Again, I'm looking at this. Adding a little bit more of these pine needles here. Trying to even it out more or less. And then, as we get to the top, it comes to a single branched point, right? It kind of looks like a little bit like a Christmas tree. Well, because Christmas trees are fir trees, but, you know. And then you had the right idea here with the shadow. I'm gonna grab the same colors you have. And then I'll sort of explain what I would normally do with the fir tree. And I had to learn this recently, actually. I used to make my fir trees way too blue. I've had to learn this too, so no worries. So did I really just do that? I painted the fir tree on the background. Oh my gosh. Alright, let's fix that real quick. I love how you guys get to see the real time of me messing up. It's lovely, isn't it? Alright, is that... Oh, wrong way. Come on. There we go. It's not gonna be perfect, but... you know, I'll take it for now. It's fine. So I'm gonna add a little bit of a darker shadow like you did at the bottom. Actually, no. I said I was going to follow with your color scheme first. Okay. So this, I think I picked up your shadow color first. Okay, I did. I'm gonna pick up your base coat. So I'm just going to be, again, we're following the same shape. I'm following the same shape of your fir tree. And I'm just adding a little bit of a gap here so that I can let some of that shadow show through. And of course, what am I painting? I messed up the layers. That's not like me. Hang on 1 second. I messed it up here. Okay. I think I lack palm rejection. Okay, there we go. So the trunk is kind of hidden, but the trunk helped us get the main shape. Again, I'm just sort of basing here, leaving a little bit more for shadow. I'm not being super precise, super perfect with it. I might unlock this and fill in a little bit of the inside, probably with a darker color. And I do think your shadow is probably darker than what I had. Let me test that. Yeah, you do have deeper shadow, so I'm gonna make sure that I capture that. Because it's good to have deep shadow for this. And again, I'm being very rough and I am staggering my brush. That's the thing, like this is very, I can tell that when you're painting this, you are, well, not this one, this one's mine. When you're painting this, I can tell you're a little bit unsure because it's very harsh. It's very stark. It has a lot of, what's the word? It's very deliberate, and you actually don't want to be super deliberate when you're doing organic stuff. You want everything to be very loose. Now I'm gonna grab your highlight. We're just gonna add a little bit of the highlight here. Sort of to the edges as you have, but I'm more so matching the direction of the leaves. As you can see here, a little bit of highlight. So even though I wasn't as precise as you have it, do you see how my lack of precision is actually making more realistic trees? That lack of precision is actually what helps you when you're doing organic things like this. It's very weird, it's very counterintuitive, especially if you're used to like more man-made type stuff. It is something that is hard to learn. Or not hard to learn, but like hard to wrap your head around. But something like that is gonna give you a bit more of a realistic render. Now the other thing I want to point out, because again, this was hard for me to learn. The trees themselves are not, this is a very blue toned green. This green has a lot of blue in it. It's actually really dull and really yellow. Do you see? Okay. If I grab this color, your main highlight color, right? And if I grab the main highlight color on this tree, and it's a little hard because, you know, there's a reason we got rid of the white. Let me see if I can grab the actual highlight. There's so much blending going on. This is the highlight color of this tree. Of this tree versus this tree. So what you actually want to do is you want your tree to be kind of really yellow. So I'm going to hue shift this. I'm going to shift the hue. You can't see the menu here, I don't think, but I'm going to, this is more towards like a blue spruce. I want to go the opposite way to more yellow, and I want to desaturate it heavily. You see the difference there? Bright green to like a very yellow and desaturated color. Make it lighter. Be a little bit more saturated. And then, for the shadow, you actually want to go, like, do you see this is nearly black? You want to go almost pure black for the shadow, nearly. So I would just go in, and again, I wouldn't be super precise. I would just sort of fit it in as you can. You want it to mainly be in the bottom section and in the middle, but you don't want it to be really strict. You want it to be very, very loose with where you put it. Because that's going to have more of that organic feel. And that's gonna help you no matter what kind of tree you're doing. This is actually like something I had to learn because I was doing a Christmas tree for a client. And it's a lot duller than you'd think, and it's a lot more yellow. And the shadows are nearly black, which is kind of crazy. Even in this really bright atmosphere, they're almost black. So, do you see the difference, like, between this first tree and then this tree where we sort of started breaking down the shape with our brush, and then this tree where we made everything dull and more intense in the shadows and much more closer to yellow? This is going to be like our most realistic tree. And then, okay, I talked about the peaks and valleys. I'm just gonna draw that. Do I have that drawn over? I do. Okay. I might keep that up as like a separate version. And then what else? I think the tree is the main thing, right? Because once you get the tree down, I think you did a pretty good job on this. On the church. I can tell you probably zoomed in really, really tight for this. You probably don't need to when it's like, when it's just the photo study. But because it is man-made, then it does make sense that, it does make sense then that you, made it very, very tight because it's a man-made structure. Do dark foliage have lavender tint? I wouldn't say so, no. I would say that with this fir tree, it's definitely more on the dull yellow side. I don't really see any lavender to it. Maybe not a lavender, but maybe like a slate gray in some areas, but I wouldn't say lavender. I think you understand the point I was making about the mountain color, right? Is that you have more blue and more, this is actually lavender. The mountain here actually has a lot of lavender in it. This has a lot more lavender and slate gray. Not so much the trees, and then by differentiating that, you're creating nice color contrast. So, if I was to do a paint over of this, if I was to do like a really rough paint over without changing like too much of what you were doing, I've already just demonstrated what I would do with the trees. The reason that this might look a little bit awkward that I'm realizing now is because you didn't add the fence, and I think that the slope of this hill is not natural because of this road. I think a lot of it was cut and then probably like reseeded. So if you had the fence here, I think that would actually add a lot for the structure of this fence, or for the structure of this piece, as if you were to add the fence back in. You don't have to, I'm just saying. This I would probably dull down more. I'd probably make this more like a tan. Otherwise, you are creating the Wizard of Oz yellow brick road, which is fine if that's what you want. But I would tone that down a little bit. I would add your fence back in, you know, grab some of that color back in from the road, add it to the fence. I'm being super rough with the fence. That's such a bad fence. I might, like, take that back from what I had painted before, but you got it, you get it. It's like, it's really guiding the eye. Again, this part of the road, I would just make a little bit softer. I would just have a little bit of a softer end to it here. And then I'm painting back in the tree, just in case. You see how that just sort of creates a nice, natural flow to things? The other thing with the fence that I'm now realizing is you don't want them to meet like this. That's my bad. But I would extend the hill so that you have a barrier between the guardrail and the fence if you do put in the fence. I mean, let me see. Do you need the fence? If you have the rest of the hill there? Okay, if you have the rest of the hill there, you do not need the fence. The fence is sort of creating a nice break. But if you slope this hill a little bit more, then I think you can get away with not having the fence there. I think that's okay. Let's see. This does have a little bit of an intensity. If I can move it a little bit. Don't know if that's gonna work. There we go. And then same here. This is a little bit even. So I would just find, like, this is about a 1-to-1 ratio you have here. Like a 1-to-1 on the hill. So I would either make it like 2-to-1 here or 2-to-1 here. So I'll probably just make it 2-to-1 here. It creates a little more visual interest. I see you tried to extend the guardrail way past here. Is there a guardrail there? I guess there is. I didn't even notice it there, to be honest. It's so tiny. But yeah, you could continue that. You could continue the guardrail there. And then for visual interest, I would probably put, like, I probably wouldn't just have one tree here. Well, there is one tree there. I take it back. Maybe if you had, I think if you had a little bit more openness here with this piece. There's some tangent that's bothering me here. I think if you had this tree going around, and then if you had this tree as like a different hue, right? So if these were going more back into the background. Where you have it here, I might add a little bit more there, or maybe make this one more solid. Because these are not too far apart, but this is very far apart from here. You've got the right idea. You definitely have a lot of elements that are the right idea. So I might just add a little bit more visual interest here, and then I'd probably do something that made the highlights really intense there, so it stood out from these. Let me see here. I'm kind of rethinking how I did that, actually, but you can sort of play around with that. I'd probably hue shift it. So I would most likely grab all of these. This had the ones in the front have more contrast. But then I would, like you had here, I'd maybe desaturate them like you did, and then give them a little bit more of that atmosphere. Is that changing anything? It's hard to tell. There we go. And then I'd maybe make these a little bit shorter. And by doing that, we can create, yeah, that's gonna help. That's gonna help a lot, is making these a little bit shorter and a little bit pointier so that we are able to define the silhouette. Because, again, silhouette, huge thing. There we go. It's getting a little bit natural, flowy. Make this a little bit more gradual. And then for the mountains, I would definitely give them... I would definitely change the color of the mountain. I would definitely get rid of this green hue that they have, and I would push them much closer to a lavender, ironically. I'm just gonna very roughly select these, and the reason why I would do this is so that they can really stand out from the trees. Even if it's daytime, I would make sure that you can really tell that these are different objects. Because these almost, if I blur my eyes, this almost could get mistaken for a tree. So I'm going to push these a lot. Let's see here. Where's our mountain? Where'd our piece go? Here we go. I would push these a lot further towards the sky color. See, already there, you are already creating much more of a distinction between the trees and the mountains. And I would make them a little bit lighter, maybe make them a little bit duller. That way you can differentiate it much easier. And I'll make sure that I don't accidentally... Oh, come on. Why are you being annoying? Don't accidentally paint on the wrong end here. There we go. I would just add some darker shadow. And again, we still want these to show up with our variation of brush strokes. Something like that. That's our highlight color. And then these trees in the back, I would dull in the same way that you did here. Maybe a little bit more blue because of the atmosphere. And then the highlight is also going to be a different color. It's also going to be a little bit duller. And I'm just doing this really, really quick with the trees. It's not super accurate, but just sort of showing that you want to establish a light source, right? So right now you have it very much like the shadow and light are even on both sides. You want to just be able to sort of pick where your sun is coming from. So if the sun is coming from this direction, right? Here. You want to just sort of heavily emphasize the shadow on one direction. Or it doesn't have to be super heavy depending on the time of day. Like if it is daytime, it's not going to be very intense. But you might want a little bit of it just to kind of guide people's eyes a little, right? You never want a highlight this intense, so I'm actually going to dull it from this very vibrant color. I'm gonna add a little bit more yellow to it as well. Adding yellow also sort of establishes where your sunlight is. And I'll grab a bit of that base so that we can kind of blend it back in a little nicer. Since I'm painting on the real thing, I need to grab another example to see the before and after. I'm gonna put that up here. This is what we have so far. Kind of cools everything down a little bit. I'll just do that same thing here. So you can have light on both sides, you just want to be very sparse about it. You might want to favor one side over the other, depending on your environment, depending on the situation. You can see already, even if I'm mainly following your guides, the texture brush just helps a lot. Just helps add some variation here. There we go. And then a little bit here as well. Again, I really want to separate the background and the foreground. Mainly these trees from these ones. Probably good for now, and probably gets your idea down. You could play with the colors later if you wanted. Something like that helps. And then I really think that overall I would just sort of, I would tone down this color from being like almost neon green to just being a little bit more yellow and a little bit more desaturated. Maybe a little bit more intense. Just sort of desaturate your environment a little. Usually more neon colors can come off looking like a little bit more juvenile, a little bit more like Crayola. So you want to avoid those really, really intense greens if you can help it. If you can add some more, if you can add slightly duller colors, slightly desaturated, it gives your piece more maturity. Which, maybe you want something that's like hyperpop, maybe you want to work with neon. But when you are doing things like landscape paintings, toning things down will help a lot in creating a more serious looking professional piece. And I say this as a rainbow fox. So I know it's sometimes hard to tone this stuff down, but trust me, it does help. It does help. I'm also adding a little bit more blue onto this one because I want to gradate these nicely, right? I don't want them to all just go from one color and then the next one be solidly different. I want to sort of gradate them, and I do see that you did that. I'm just sort of emphasizing my own color changes here. And then I would just make this mountain go down a little bit more gradually, because mountains sort of slope a lot, right? I might add a little bit of variation here, just so it's not all direct shadow to direct light, right? Create a little bit of Create a little bit of edge in the mountain. Right? A little bit of cracks. Variation on the rock formation. And sometimes I put the light where the shadow is, and it just sort of creates a little bit of a back highlight. Might do it one more here. Again, just sort of establishing the difference in the rock formation. Creates a little bit more visual interest that way, you see? I might do it one more time here. Because mountains aren't going to be perfectly smooth, right? They're always going to have some cracks and crevices and things like that. So, creating that variation where the light and the shadow are with mountains creates more of a natural formation to them. I might add a tiny bit of light here. Not too much. Alright. Seeing if there's anything else here, but maybe smooth that hill out a little bit. Maybe continue that back. That helps the tree stand out a little. And add a little bit more here, just so there's less of a tangent. But honestly, I think that's probably... I might soften these light areas a little bit more. Just so that they're not all like shadow, mid-ground, highlight. They have a little bit of color variation. They're not all super even that way. So it's thin here, it's thick here. Create some visual interest doing that. But yeah. And then let's see, this is with the slight overpaint, and then this is before. So it's pretty subtle, but you're adding a little bit more maturity in your color palette. You're paying attention to silhouette and how things are affected. And it just creates like a nice overview. It is less intense, so if you wanted to, what you could do is you could just you could just like push the saturation of everything more at the same time. A little bit of the saturation and the background. Actually, here, I'll do that real quick just to show you. I'm gonna grab all the pieces that I used, minus the paint over. Put that all in a folder. And I'm just gonna merge it, just so we can see it all. I'm gonna select this. I'm just gonna push the brightness and contrast a tiny bit. Push the contrast, push the brightness. Not that much. Very, very subtle here. Just a little bit, just so there's like more daytime. And then it's a little bit more of a fair comparison here. So a lot of what I did is I changed the angles of things, and I was desaturating some of the more intense colors, pushing where the highlights of the trees are, pushing where the sun would be. Here, I'll just very quickly, you know, the direction of the sun. So we're just sort of hitting where those highlights might be. And if it's coming from here, right, if the sun is directly overhead, if it's midday, then you can put the highlights on each side. I would just be careful that it doesn't look too uniform, that's all. So I'm sort of creating a sunlight for you. If it's direct over midday, what you could do is you could sort of add highlights very intensely here, and then they gradually disappear as you get closer to the bottom, right? That's also light direction. So you could do that as well. But yeah, again, our before and after, sort of making the mountains a little bit more natural, sort of changing the hill direction. You could push that too, but again, going off of your piece. And then I hope that this helps in regards to how I would go about painting the trees, but then also how you don't have to be super precise all the time. That you can add these blotches of color and just get the feeling of where these trees are, as long as you get the right silhouette shape. Alright. We've been going for a bit, so I think that we are going to wrap it up there. I hope that this was helpful to you. I hope that you could learn some tips and tricks from this. If there is any questions that you have on this, I am happy to answer them. Feel free to reach out. I do not mind if you ask any questions, but hopefully this helps you. Alright. Alright. I'm gonna stop the recording there. Stayed up way longer than I should. I'll go and collapse now. Progress on the funny explosive device has been made, however, a chat shall post to the Discord. Alright, Blank. And thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. This was fun. I probably will not go that long next time. I couldn't really figure out how long it was going to take to sort of get through this lesson, so I do appreciate your patience. Next time we do Chillstream, it can be a little more casual, and I can chat a bit more, and we can talk a bit more, so thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope that you were able to learn something too. I hope that sort of talking through my process might have helped you as well. Yeah. Tomorrow I am taking the day off from streaming. And Friday I will be on Irium, and Saturday we might go back to Hamtaro. It is 5:30 a.m. Oh my gosh, Blank. Okay, alright. Sorry, time zones. But thank you very much for hanging out with me today, Stargazers. I hope you had fun. And now, wherever you may be in the world or the worlds beyond, I hope you have a great rest of your day, evening, and especially night for many of you. And thank you so much, Stargazers. All the best.